The boy was dying on a hospital floor, and the only person who could save him was a 58-year-old nurse everyone thought had never left the small town of Millbrook her entire life. Blood pooled beneath his small body as sirens wailed outside the emergency doors. Nurses froze. Doctors shouted orders that came too slow. And then, from the far end of the corridor, a woman in faded blue scrubs moved with a calm that did not belong in that chaos, a calm forged somewhere no one in that hospital had ever imagined. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet heroes hiding behind ordinary faces, hit that like button right now, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Midnight Tales so you never miss a story that reminds you why kindness still matters. Her name was Eleanor Voss, though almost no one in Millbrook General Hospital called her that. To the nurses half her age, to the exhausted residents, to the mothers pacing the waiting room at 3 in the morning, she was simply Doc, a nickname she never explained and never corrected. She had worked the night shift for 11 years, arriving before anyone else and leaving only when the sun forced its way through the blinds. She kept to herself. She ate lunch alone in the stairwell instead of the break room. She flinched, just slightly, whenever a car backfired in the parking lot, and no one ever thought to ask why. What they knew of Eleanor was small and safe. She made the best coffee in the building, she remembered every patient's name, and she had a way of holding a frightened child's hand that seemed to still even the wildest heartbeat. What they did not know, what she had buried under 2 decades of quiet civilian life, was that Eleanor Voss had once been Captain Eleanor Voss, a combat trauma nurse who had served 3 tours overseas, who had operated in tents lit only by flashlight while mortar fire shook the ground beneath her boots, who had carried more young soldiers off battlefields than she could ever bring herself to count. She had left that life behind on purpose. When she came home for the last time, she folded her uniform into a box, sealed it, and pushed it to the back of a closet she rarely opened. She told herself that Millbrook would be simple. Small. Safe. She wanted routine, grocery runs on Sundays, the same booth at the diner, patients whose worst day was a broken wrist rather than a shattered femur. She wanted to forget the sound mortars made when they landed too close, the weight of a soldier's hand going still in hers. For years, it worked. She built walls so quiet that even she sometimes forgot what they were hiding. But wounds like hers do not disappear. They wait. The town knew her as steady, dependable, a little distant, the kind of woman people respected without truly knowing. Her co-workers joked that Doc never panicked, not once, not during the worst car pileups, not during the night a gas explosion sent a dozen patients through their doors at once. They admired her calm without understanding where it came from. They did not know that her stillness in crisis had been paid for at a price most people would never have to imagine. And Eleanor let them believe whatever was easiest, because the truth felt too heavy to hand to people who had never had to carry anything like it. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. A car had jumped the curb outside the elementary school 3 blocks away. A 10-year-old boy named Caleb had been thrown clear, his small body broken in ways the ER doctors, for a critical handful of seconds, did not know how to fully address. Internal bleeding. A collapsing lung. The kind of injury combat medics see and civilian hospitals rarely do. The trauma team called for backup, but backup was minutes away, and Caleb did not have minutes. Eleanor heard the commotion from the hallway and moved before she had time to think, the way she always had, the way years of training had carved into her bones. She dropped to her knees beside the boy, her hands finding the wound with a precision that startled the younger doctors watching. She barked orders in a voice no one recognized, sharp, sure, commanding, the voice of someone who had done this 100 times before, in far worse places than a clean, well-lit hospital corridor. She packed the wound. She adjusted his airway. She kept her palm pressed firmly over the place where his life was trying to slip away, murmuring softly to him even as her hands worked with brutal efficiency, telling him he was safe, telling him to stay with her, telling him it was not his day to go. It was in that moment, with blood on her hands and steel in her voice, that something in the hallway shifted. A group of Marines, in town for a memorial ceremony at the local VFW, had been waiting nearby when the emergency call came through the building. They watched her work. And one by one, their expressions changed from concern to recognition to something like disbelief. One of the older Marines stepped forward, staring at her as though he had seen a ghost. He whispered a name under his breath, not Doc, not Eleanor, but Captain Voss, the name of a woman whispered about in medic training rooms for years, a woman credited with saving dozens of lives under fire in conditions most people could not survive, let alone function in. The hallway went silent except for the beeping of monitors and Caleb's shallow, fighting breaths. Eleanor did not look up. She did not have time for the past to catch up with her, not while a child's life was balanced on the edge of her hands. She worked until the surgical team arrived, until Caleb was stable enough to be wheeled away, until the crisis had passed and the adrenaline began to drain from her body, leaving only exhaustion and the trembling she always tried to hide afterward. It was only then, sitting on an overturned supply crate in the hallway, that she allowed herself to breathe. And it was only then that she looked up to see an entire row of Marines standing at attention, watching her with a respect so profound it nearly broke her composure. One of them, a young corporal who had heard her name spoken like legend during his own training, quietly said that she had saved his mentor's life a decade earlier in a place he would not name. Word spread through the hospital in minutes. The quiet, coffee-making night nurse everyone thought they knew was, in truth, one of the most decorated combat medics of her generation. For years, Eleanor had believed that her old life needed to stay buried, that healing meant forgetting, that being ordinary was the only way to survive what she had seen. But watching Caleb open his eyes in recovery 2 days later, watching his mother weep with gratitude, watching her coworkers look at her not with pity but with awe, she began to understand something different. Her past was not a wound to hide. It was the reason she had been able to save that boy's life at all. It was not something shameful, it was the deepest, most sacred part of who she was. She did not become boastful. She did not suddenly wear her medals to work. But something in her softened, opened, like a door long locked finally allowed to breathe fresh air. She began speaking, quietly at first, to young nurses who wanted to understand trauma care more deeply. She began attending the very memorial ceremonies she used to avoid. She let herself, for the first time in 20 years, be seen. Caleb's mother later said that the woman who saved her son's life did not look like a hero in the movies, no armor, no fanfare, just steady hands and a heart made unshakably strong by everything she had survived. And maybe that is the truest kind of heroism there is, the kind that hides in plain sight, making coffee in a hospital break room, remembering your name, holding your hand through the worst night of your life, asking for nothing in return. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the quietest people around us often carry the greatest strength, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Your support means more than you know, and it helps stories like Eleanor's reach the hearts that need them most. And before we go, we have a special request. In the comments below, tell us one word that describes the quiet hero in your own life, someone who has carried more than anyone ever knew. Because sometimes, the bravest people in the room are the ones we never think to ask.